let's get on with our webinar, shall we? So why have we decided to choose this topic? Prove it, measure, analyze, and communicate the value of patient centricity in your company. Well, the motivation really has been driven by two things. Firstly, in our research, we've found that there's a real sense of them versus us in many companies, and those who are bought into patient centricity as a concept still facing a lot of barriers internally, having to justify their efforts through a focus on profitability in order to get the green light for their patient-focused initiatives. And I'm fairly sure that many of you listening in will be familiar with that kind of sentiment within your own company, even though we have changed a lot over the last few years. Secondly, we found that there is a very strong desire for a lot of practical advice when it comes to the how of patient centricity. Many of us are now satisfied with the why and what, but how do we work with people in R&D? How do we work with people in market access? How do we actually measure, and how do we reward our employees for the work that they're doing? And that's just a few of the questions that we're hoping to address today with the excellent panelists you can see in front of you, and I'll introduce them to you just a second. But you guys already recognize all of that. We wouldn't have 1,000 of you signed up, which is what we do have, if you didn't already believe that. So this is clearly an important topic, and obviously hugely grateful that you have tuned in today. So, a big thank you to my colleague Nikki Williams, who has put together today's webinar. She's sitting next to me now, and she'll be doing a real-life version of this conversation in a conference later in October. But let me introduce our panelists. So let's go from the top left. So Anjali, you can see there, is Global Head of Patient Engagement Strategy at Sanofi. Really delighted that Anjali could join us. She's been very passionate, particularly since her grandfather died in his 70s due to cardiovascular disease, and has become really strongly minded about increasing awareness of multiple chronic conditions, considering our whole body's health, especially amongst South Asian, African, and Hispanic Americans who are historically at much higher risk of diabetes. Underneath her, we have Emma Sutcliffe. Emma is a long-standing good friend of mine and of Viva Pharma's, and I'm delighted she could join us today in her role at Grünenthal as Consultant Director for Patient Engagement. It sounds like a fascinating role there. She is actually working more on the R&D side of the business, leading translational engagement initiatives in that part of the business. And Emma is also, amongst many things, an expert in real-world experience and data, and obviously that carries a lot of weight as well. She is also a published poet and a medical science writer, and obviously the very pinnacle of her career is that she is a regular columnist on the Viva Pharma website as well. So we get to hear a lot from Emma, and I'm very grateful for it. Thank you for joining us. Let's go to the right-hand side. You will see David. David describes himself as having joined the industry twice. First in 1996 when he started working, and second emotionally in 2005, so I don't think he actually left, but in 2005 he became a cancer patient, unfortunately, but very thankfully a survivor, of course, and is very passionate about the huge value we're bringing to patients and the role we play in helping people live better lives. David, unfortunately, is not alone, because Jennifer, also underneath him, is a cancer survivor, and she is equally passionate about working in this industry that is going to do more to quickly diagnose and treat patients earlier, and therefore provide improved outcomes. So qualified, certainly, educated very well, and I think that you're going to hear some great things from all of our panelists today. We've had some fascinating conversations in the run-up to this webinar. I have one request for the audience, and that is that you try to make this, together with me, part of a conversation rather than just a delivery from our four panelists today. As I said before, we do have 1,000 people signed up, and I can see that several hundred people are signed in as we speak right now. And I think that's a great opportunity to have a good conversation, use the wisdom of the crowd, and hopefully find more than just pluralities, but certainly real practical advice going forward. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually ask you a question, because I'm just lovely like that. And on your screens now, we're going to put a poll. Now, I'm going to explain this one to you, as it's not going to make sense when you see the words. We had a Barcelona conference. It's our flagship conference earlier this year. And those of you who were there may recall that we had Dominic Livet, who is the CEO of Vive Healthcare, which is a GSK company. And we also had David Epstein, who was until recently the CEO of Novartis Pharmaceuticals. And they actually said two different things. Dominic said that pharma companies need to cut back in terms of their short-term profitability in order to refocus on patients, while David Epstein said that profitability and patient focus absolutely go hand in hand. So I'm going to ask you guys who you think is right. So Dominic Limay, just to say it once more, said that we need to cut back from our short-term profitability goals in order that we as an industry can refocus on patients and long-term value, whereas David Epstein said that he believes very much in an and culture. It's possible very much to be profitable and patient-focused, and you shouldn't ever side with either side of those. They absolutely have to be together. So I've given you 4 options, and I'm just going to hold that open for a few more seconds. I can see that about half of you have voted so far, so I'll hold it open 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right, let's have a look at the answers. You'll hopefully see them in front of your screen. I think that we're very much, from these results, on the and side. So 60% nearly go with David, patient focus and profitability, but a significant minority still, 8% thinks that we, as an industry, need to cut back. 31, that's a good third, somehow say both of them. So I'm interested perhaps in some of the reasons why people might have said that. If you want to throw that into the Q&A box on the side of the screen, then we can read out some of your thoughts. And of course, a 2%, neither of them. So also interested in what those people have to say. So let's open it up to our esteemed panelists now. I'm going to start with Anjali just because you are top left on the screen there. So let's unmute everybody and get this conversation going. Does that surprise you, that result, Anjali? Would you concur with that?
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. So the results actually don't surprise me, although if I had been allowed to answer the question, I would have also picked both of them with a 31% pool. In my opinion, patient focus is a goal or a target, while profitability is an outcome depending on the effectiveness of implementation of the journey. And so for that reason, I think both panelists are actually correct.
Yeah, and this is Jen Music, and I would also agree with that. I think it's both, because if we go from an organizational perspective, you can have some rules in an organization that are fully focused on patient centricity, right? Your MSL organization, you might have key account managers that work more on a population health and patient side, and there's still going to be a focus on sales and profits. You're going to have a sales organization that focuses on profits, but it doesn't mean that they have to solely focus on profits to the detriment of patients. You can work on both, and so I actually see that as an organization, we need to be patient-centric. I feel like we are, but you could have different functions that might have more lend to one or the other side.
Okay.
Hi.
Who else wants to chime in on that?
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to make Emma here. I'm kind of fascinated by the fear that we have around putting pharmaceuticals in the same sentence as profit. And certainly from a patient perspective, when you get ill, you reach for help from your doctor and you want a solution to your problem. And I think I might sound quite trite in saying that, but everybody on this panel has experienced illness or have relatives who have experienced illness. We're all going to experience illness. And from a patient perspective, and this webinar is about patient centricity, I think there's a problem in that we don't actually communicate to patients what it actually costs to develop a product, what it costs to get something through R&D, through the pipeline, the cost of lack of compliance, lack of adherence. So I think patient centricity requires, at the very ground level, an effort from the industry to, increase health literacy. The average reading age, sadly across Europe, general literacy is the age of 10. So when we're trying to communicate or explain drug development and the research and development costs, we're not speaking to an informed audience. So I think, patient centricity goes right back to those basics. How do we help to explain the costs of what pharma does and why, and actually the profits go hand in hand with that. So I'd like to take it right back to making quite an assertion that patients are not particularly health literate, and they're certainly not literate around R&D costs. So I think we can do a lot to plug it very early in the system.
Emma, I've heard quite a few people say that before, and obviously I agree with you that educating patients is something that we want to do, and generally we see that it correlates better with their treatment. But can we really expect, are we going to be always fighting an uphill battle if we expect our patient population to really understand pharma? I mean, no one understands how much it costs to make an iPhone, or costs to create other things, or do business in other areas, and we don't hear that argument from other industries. So why is it that we need to have that explained in pharma to sort of justify ourselves?
Are you putting that for me to respond to, or is it out to
Yeah, well, if you've got a response, go for it.
Well, we're all trying to be more patient-centric, and I think that in itself is it's a term that means lots of different things to lots of different people. And actually, it's more about how we get closer to patients, and actually how we help patients to get closer to us. So I don't buy it, actually, that we can't find the right language or the communications to communicate to patients about how drugs are developed, how they work in their body. I think if we commit ourselves to finding the right language to communicate well to patients, then that is about putting ourselves in their shoes, and we should be able to find the right way to communicate that to them. We worry about patient centricity, but we also need to think about what makes a good patient. So it has to come from both directions.
Okay, I'm going to put the poll results back on the screen. Sorry, we took them off perhaps a little prematurely, but let's let Jennifer and David come in on this.
Oh, sorry, I thought David was going next. Yeah, no, I think the hard thing is, especially in the U.S., so coming from a U.S. focus, is that if you look at just even the number of prescriptions that are written and the percentage of branded prescriptions that are written, I think brand's down to still like under 20%. And so if I listen to what Emma's saying, I think we need to clearly articulate the value of the medicine that we're bringing out, because it is at a higher cost than a $4 generic, and really help patients understand what their disease state is, what they're being treated for, and why, if they were on a generic first or now they're going to a brand or the branded medicine, why that brand makes sense, and then how to help them also own and manage their disease, because their doctor and that medicine is only part of the problem. And so, and I would fully agree with you that the more that we can help educate patients, the better, and as an organization help them understand why, based on their profile, based on their information that was just shared with the doctor, right, why this person needs that next brand and why they need the holistic view of treatment. So I would agree with you. I think the question really is, how do we do that? So if anybody has ideas on how, that would be great.
The next poll question up on the screen. Let me read it out to you. Do you believe that currently the best pharma performers commercially are also those who have the most patient-centric values? I actually asked this question in another webinar just a few days ago, had some very interesting results. So is there a correlation? Can you select one of those options? So yes, there is a strong correlation. The people who perform commercially within our organizations are also the ones that have the most patient-centric values. Neutral, there is no real correlation at all. Or no, there is a strong negative correlation. So the commercial performers are the ones that have less patient-centric values. So let's see how it works in practice according to everybody on the line. I'm going to hold that again for another few seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's have a look. All right, got most of your votes there. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so 32%, yes, there is a strong correlation, but actually higher than that, no real correlation whatsoever, from 38%. A small number of people, 4%, say there's a negative correlation, still significant, and not sure, I think that that is a significant, more than a quarter of people actually don't know the answer to that question. So that clearly shows that the need for measurement and understanding of this is still keenly felt out there. Let me go back to Anjali, back again, if that's all right, because I don't know if David is with us yet, but we'll go back to you if that's all right. Any reaction to this piece now?
I'm actually surprised, Paul, that of how high the neutral bucket is. In my opinion and in my experience, there is a strong correlation. In fact, in the Eye for Pharma's health check of 2014, I recall 85% of respondents termed focus on patient centricity as the best route to profitability. And in our experience, too, at Sanofi, we are truly becoming a more patient-centric organization, and in some of the programs that we have launched, we're seeing direct correlation here.
Okay. Carry on. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to continue. So I actually really believe that harnessing patient centricity accelerates value creation through engagement, through alignment, through agility, and when we do it right, it can actually make some significant impact.
Okay, Emma, I think you have something to say on this.
I'm probably going to sound quite, esoteric, like I'm going off on a tangent. Sorry, I am guilty of doing that quite often. Mother of invention and all that kind of stuff. I think this is. I would liken this to medicine for progressive diseases. So, for example, Alzheimer's is a progressive illness. People are going to deteriorate. The condition is a progressive one. So actually, when we give people stay with me here, there'll be a point. If we give people who have Alzheimer's, acetylcholinesterase inhibitors, for example, their disease will still progress, and the medication is able to halt an inevitable progression, but their disease progresses. I think that's the correlation here. If we don't have patient-centric values, then there will be a negative relationship between patients and industry. If we do have patient-centric values, there's still going to be some concern around bias around products. That's natural. So actually, what we need to do is make sure that we have at least the opportunity to engage and communicate patient-centric values, because otherwise people are going to fill in the blanks. And people who aren't present, who aren't communicating with patients, patients will just say, do you have patient-centric values or not? So I would say the best pharma performers commercially are those who do have patient-centric values. It might appear neutral, but actually increasingly patients want to engage with pharma. So you can't avoid it. It needs to happen.
I completely agree with you, Emma. This is Anjali. I was actually just thinking, too, if you look at the companies that have rare diseases, they are very patient-centric, and they are always talking to their patients. In fact, many of them know each and every one of the patients that are on their products. And we're seeing, a significant increase in terms of their performance, and their rate of increase over the past few years has been significantly higher than general pharma.
Sorry, I think, Anjali, you were coming back on that.
Well, Paul, this is Jen, and I would just say so.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah, so before working at Roche, I worked at Pfizer Pharmaceuticals for just over 16 years, and I know it's probably 5 or 6 years ago that we started to really focus on the patient journey. So how are patients identified, the patients that were at risk? So it's not even just the more specialized, the oncology, the immunotherapy medicines, but even broad medicines, the pain management or diabetes, right? How are patients walking through the office? Where are there opportunities to engage them and better understand if they're at risk? How do you take those patients at risk and identify them if they, where they are in the risk spectrum and make sure that they get treated appropriately? And so even, we can talk about patient centricity in the more specialized medicines. I think there's real clear correlation there. You can see that more clearly. But, coming from my former organization, we were thinking about how do we help people in a doctor's office engage with patients at different touch points so that we can help them to better identify patients at risk and get them diagnosed and treated so that they could have a better quality of life and overall better outcomes. And so I say sometimes we go to the real specialized medicine, it's really clear there, but the patient centricity and correlation can happen even in more of the primary care general medicine products that are on the market.
Okay, David, we would love to hear from you as we've had two poll questions, and I'd love to hear your opinion on both.
Can you hear me now, Paul?
Yes. Okay, David clearly can't hear me, which is interesting. Right, I suggest that we go to the audience for a moment because some of you guys have been throwing in some great questions and things and comments on what we've heard so far. For example, Wendy Erler says that if you consider that patient focus has to be rooted in trust, then there is a lot of data that shows that trusted companies are more profitable. Often the metric assigned to profitability cannot be a solid line drawn to patient focus, but the contribution is there. Well, that may well be true, but I think that we need to try in any case to find metrics, and that's something that we're going to be talking about while we're here. Tim Mustel says that industry must work hand in glove with the many PPI, that's public and patient involvement initiatives, which are growing in order to improve health literacy, a vital first step to reduce cynicism around industry motives. But Diane Bryson says that the correlation between patient centricity and performance is not there, only because most companies are simply not patient-centered, despite what they say they are. So perhaps some different opinions there. Let me ask you guys, what are you doing within your companies to actually address this point? What are you actually doing on the ground? Would you say that your companies are genuinely spending in the right direction to improve the health literacy, to improve educating the patients, or at least readying the patients almost for some of the activities that you'd like to take more part in? Emma, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with lots of different pharma companies. You know, that's the privilege of being a consultant, is that you can put patient-centric values into, you know, from a patient perspective into different companies, and you know, you can kind of go in house and have your meetings with people and say some quite provocative things and then leave. So I'm privileged to be able to be an independent consultant in this. At the moment, the company that I'm working with, you know, they are very, very committed to having even a conversation, having a very trusted conversational piece with patients. Now, some of the pain indications that they want to you know, be helping patients with are for kind of embarrassing conditions, you know, vulvodynia, bladder pain. What we have to recognize is those are the kind of conditions that patients don't necessarily want to be, you know, overt about and seeking information from industry about. So the kind of initiatives that Grünenthal are putting together are creating patient portals so that patients can talk to each other. So sometimes it's about providing services to help people be private and still sociable around conditions they've got. And I think, you know, hats off to companies that are willing to provide these kind of channels and venues. And there's absolutely no, there is no profitability linked with that at all right now. It's just around, you know, helping people to be able to voice their concerns and help them to seek, you know, to get help. I can speak, you know, with independent positivity and praise towards Pfizer, for example, when they put on the Man MOT and the Men's Health initiatives and provided opportunities for men to talk and men to raise their concerns around their health. So, you know, there are some great examples of patient centricity approaches and projects that, you know, ultimately will raise trust and the opportunity for a relationship between industry and patients. So not just within Grünenthal, you know, there are many such examples, even providing, you know, scientific reporting services. ASCO was just fantastically represented by pharma companies who, you know, were tweeting information for patients to get hold of. So I think, you know, I think just to one of the earlier points, just saying that you're patient-centric isn't the point. You know, giving someone that title isn't the point, and patients won't be fooled by that. It's about the action. What do you actually do to increase health literacy, to help people talk to one another, and to help them to communicate with their doctor? So patient-centricity is about action. It's not about a title or a claim. It's about what you're actually doing to increase discussion around medical conditions.
Thank you, Emma. I think that I'm going to try David once more. I know that we've tried a few times, but I think that he genuinely is signed in right now. So, David.
Yeah, sorry. Can you hear me now, Paul?
Hooray. Yes, I can
oh my
hear
God.
you perfectly. So I don't know if you've been listening to any of that or if you've just been running around frantically trying to connect, but perhaps you can recall some of the results, and you can see some on your screen now, but I'd love to have your comments.
Yeah, I have been listening to the conversation, and I mean, I agree a lot with what's been said. You know, I would say first I would revisit a little bit the last point that Emma just made. I was at ASCO as well, and I think if you look at how much we are doing now, both directly for the patient and still indirectly in terms of education, information, you know, there's a significant value that we're creating. And in terms of, you know, the earlier conversations around commercial success and the correlation, you know, I would just say, again, agree with a lot that was said. You know, being oriented towards patients and outcomes for patients doesn't necessarily cost us more. Now, in the short run, as we make a transition, there may be some small impacts, although I don't think there has to be. But in the long run, for sure, it'll help our business thrive and grow, because that's what we're here for, to help patients.
Okay. Anjali, I'm going to come to you before moving on to the next question, if that's all right. Any comments? Sorry, yeah. I'd also like to hear Jennifer as well. So Anjali first.
Sure. So at Sanofi, first of all, I agree with everything that's been said, both Emma and David's comments. You know, specifically at Sanofi, we're doing everything we can to bring the patient to the center of our business. So we are making very concerted efforts to incorporate patient insight all the way from the beginning through the, the R&D process, the clinical trial process, pre-launch efforts, marketing efforts, and really trying to drive our business strategy based off of the insights that we're getting. So I think that's one of the key things, and I think Emma was absolutely right when she said, we can all talk about patient centricity, but it's the action that actually makes a huge difference. I'd like to give Jennifer a couple of minutes now because I know that she's eager to share as well.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And I think that's really where there's a great opportunity for pharma organizations to provide the demonstration of patient centricity as we, do our clinical trials and as we're looking at the key differentiators of a new branded prescription on the market compared to, the potential current, options on the market or the generic options. The real ability to show that differentiation will not just allow us to, what it'll allow us to do is it'll allow insurers, whether that's a national health system or like in the U.S., multiple insurers, to decide how to cover the medicine and then get the medicine to patients at the best price possible. And so I see that as we move with clinical trials, that's a great opportunity for us to focus there. And David, I know we might have some questions that you might be able to answer, or Emma, I know that's more of your sweet spot, but how do we help to really start off patient centricity in the clinical trials that could drive through the way that we communicate with patients, the way that we get them access to medicines, the way that insurers cover the medicines, and then the additional kind of pill plus platforms, the other things that we do to help them engage so that they're engaging in their disease state early. So I don't know if there's a question on trials, but I'd love to move forward with that conversation as well.
Well, I think it was just touched on a moment ago, right, with what Anjali was saying. And at Merck we have a similar program where we're redesigning our entire kind of business model and processes towards patient centricity. And the element that we've added that I don't know if we have in common here is we also even have within this initiative a focus on how we develop our internal talent and our people to be patient-centric. And within that context, then what happens is your entire business model starts being integrated to patient centricity, and it's about collaboration. So at the beginning of a process, or even in the life cycle of a brand, go to the patient groups and the payers and have a conversation about what's needed and what should we do. And if you're doing that as a pharmaco, I mean, you're going to be patient-centric by definition, I think.
Okay, I'm going to take this moment to try and steer the conversation now towards the slightly tricky but absolutely vital topic of measurement. Obviously, the title, the first two words here are prove it. And I'd also like the audience to contribute to this. So if you've got any comments or insights as to what you think we need to be doing more of within our companies when it comes to not only measurement, but also analyzing the results that we have around the various patient-focused initiatives that we are talking about, then we would really appreciate that. So my question to the panelists, though, is very clear. It's what are the best metrics and KPIs that you need to deliver in your business to assess and motivate the patient centricity within it? So this time I'll come to you first, Jennifer, if that's okay.
Sure. Thanks. So the way that I think that you could identify first if you're able to focus on patient centricity would be to look at market expansion. And so sometimes it's not always focusing on your brand. I think that's where the disconnect happens. But if we're really focused on patient centricity, then we'd be looking at disease state, we'd be looking at the population health management, and really trying to understand, can we better identify patients at risk, diagnose them, and get them treated? And that treatment may not always be on our specific product. And so I think one of the first ways to measure if a company is moving towards patient centricity is to focus less on the brand and more on the overall market share and the overall market expansion, and see if we're moving the needle there. And then, right, the high tide rises all ships. If the market's expanding and more patients are diagnosed, there would then also be a correlation to potentially more of your brand. So I'd love to see if others have, different thoughts on that.
Well, before moving on, Jennifer, I'd really like to, you're the Director of Commercial Excellence, so you are obviously traditionally tasked with making sure that P&L looks rosy and ensuring that the sales pipeline is looking great. So how have you been able to actually move the needle on that within Roche, and have you been able to make much progress?
Yeah, so I'd go back so my role at Pfizer was commercial effectiveness, which was more of where this is coming from a pharma side. And so we would start with market expansion. So we had our key account managers in the U.S. working with organizations on population health and to better identify patients at risk. So whether it was really clear, like a smoking cessation, or broader, like a diabetes patient that might have pain, we would want to look first at how did that market expand, and then secondly, if the market was expanding, we would be able to pull through, then where does our brand fit within that organization. But we started to change our messaging from just purely brand focused to having our messaging with customers and with patients focused on what is going on in the patient population and how could we go first to better identification and diagnosis. And so market expansion was the first place that we went. And so P&L is always important. There's always a pressure to ensure that there's profitability of the brand. And so we would have our sales reps be pulling through opportunities. But, there's always a disconnect there. The first thing, though, that you have to look at is, are patients being diagnosed?
Okay. David, any comments on this?
Yeah, I'd add to that by saying, diagnosis is one. Then, the point is, what's the pathway, for treatment, and other guidelines in place, and do patients have access to drugs? And so I think we can look at the work in those spaces, making sure, standard of care and pathways are clear, that we have access. These are all metrics that ultimately would also drive kind of a patient-centric view of improving patients' lives and experience without having to be traditionally focused on sales or market share.
Okay. I'm going to, before I go to the others, David Robinson, one of the audience members, says that a very strong sign to look for, and this I'm deliberately saying this before coming to you, Emma, because you're focusing on R&D so much right now, but measurement should be really all about incorporating patient preference studies into FDA and other HTA submissions. A win-win, of course, a win for the company, a win for the patient, as their insight is used to help guide company action. So is it possible to think of how we are putting our value propositions, our submissions together, and whether the patient preference information, the reported outcomes, etc., is being incorporated within? Do you think that's a legitimate measurement device that we should be using? And that is going to Emma.
I think without a doubt, we're seeing the rise of kind of PROs in kind of new drug applications, and the FDA are saying more regularly that they want to incorporate more PROs into approval. But what we also, you introduced me earlier and said, this concept of real-world data. So what we need to do is make sure that we're engaging with patients so that even when those drugs are in patients' hands, that they are using them correctly, taking them correctly. I don't think it's as simple as any one type of PRO. I think we need to really evaluate what our real-world data is. What we're going to have by 2020, for example, is patient-generated data. There's a tsunami of data coming through. One person is going to have 7 health kind of connected devices, and patients are going to be generating their own data. So I would suggest that right now, one of the key things that Pharma needs to do is get itself ready internally, because in 2020, if patients are saying, well, look, I gave you all these data. I've been storing and providing my own data around the progression of my condition. And if pharma companies are saying, oh, well, we didn't really know what to do with it. We didn't ready ourselves internally for that kind of citizen data, then it's just not going to wash with patients. So increasingly, we're going to see the rise of real-world data, patient-generated data, alongside that clinical trial data for what patients want, out there outside the kind of sterility of the clinical trial. So ultimately, I think patient engagement has to start before we've even got any kind of product that we want to put through the lab. It has to start from what do patients actually need? What are they telling us? What is the data that they're offering telling us about what they need to live with their condition?
Okay, Anthony, I'm going to go to you, and then I'm going to ask another poll question to the audience.
Yeah, so I mean, our views are actually very similar. I think I'll add something very short, in that what we're really trying to do is, when we evaluate the impact of patient initiatives on anything that we develop and implement, we really try to keep in mind and keep in focus the bottom line, the patient's health outcomes and quality of life. We actually are measuring patient satisfaction as well, and really trying to understand how the initiatives and solutions that we address fit into patients' lives and make real dynamic changes to the programs that we have in place to address needs as soon as we hear them, as soon as we get the patient insights.
Okay. Well, some very sensible things there. I hope everyone listening is taking some good notes. But I want to hear the audience's opinion. I've had a few contributions. Thank you to everybody there who've written in. Keep them coming. But let's go to our poll question, which is showing up now on your screens, hopefully. Do you know how to measure, establish KPIs, and report on performance in patient centricity? So let's see where everyone is. Let's get a little sense of where the industry is. So the options are yes, and we use it to inform everything. So that would be a high bar that you've achieved. Yes, and we use it in a few areas. Yes, but we have not started, or it's not accurate. So, and then we have 2 no options. So no, we don't know how to measure it. And then finally, no, we are not focused on patient centricity. So there's a few options there. I'm going to hold it open for 5 seconds just to get you a chance to digest those. Had about 46% of people who voted so far. I'll just hold it open a few more seconds. 3, 2, 1. Let's have a look at that. Thank you to everybody. Right. 8% of people are definitely winning. They use it to inform everything. So that's actually a good figure, I would say. A quarter of people say yes, we use it in a few areas. So that is a degree of confidence. Yes, but we've not started, or it's not accurate. Nearly half of people say no, we don't know how to measure it, and then a very small minority, no, we're not focused. So, David, coming to you on this, is that surprising to you, and where would you put yourself in this poll?
I guess I am a little surprised at the 44%, and I wonder if it's more the audience saying, they don't know the specific KPIs, or they're actually not even focused on it. I think maybe qualifying that, Paul. I would say a lot of us are probably in that second bucket, and I would count myself there as well, where we've identified a few areas, but not completely across the board.
So what's missing then, David? Why aren't you in the top one? What's the hurdle that you're still trying to get over?
Well, I mean, when we say use it to inform everything, I mean that we don't use it to inform everything. There are other stakeholders that we have, right? And so we use a mix.
Yes, but surely the patient view is still important perhaps combined with other stakeholder views, but it's rare that we would exclude the patient view, isn't it?
We would never exclude the patient view.
Exactly. So, you sort of you're saying that you don't want the patient performance to inform everything. I'm just trying to make sure I'm getting the semantics right here with you.
No. I mean, what I'm saying is that patients are obviously our focus, but we have to make sure that we're including all of our stakeholders, and that's evolving past just medical practitioners, right? So there's payers, and I think we have to be focused on collaborating more, being very patient-focused, but have KPIs that measure our ability to engage all of the stakeholders for the benefit of the patient. So, because KPIs is a funny thing. I mean, if we get too focused on one thing, then we forget to look at others, is something that I will say.
Paul, this is Anjali, and I just want to, the question to me is, do we know how to measure, not do we want to measure? I think in my opinion and in my experience, we absolutely, everyone on this phone call, everyone on this webinar wants to incorporate patient-centricity into everything that we do. So I think from our standpoint, we too are in that green area. We absolutely do measure, and we use it in a few areas. In fact, we had a patient summit back in early January and discovered that across the globe at Sanofi, many people were actually in that yellow bucket. No, we don't know how to measure it. And so one of the initiatives that Ann and I are working on together is establishing guidance on KPIs across the globe. So, for example, if you are trying to do this tactic or this program, how would you go about measuring it? What things would be allowed in your country versus not? I'm also working on building a patient interaction roadmap. So I think the key here is, I think everyone would agree that it's really important. The patient view is extremely important in everything that we do. But we're still learning, and this is still a new area. And so, again, we are in that green bucket, and I'm happy to say that over the next few months, I think we'll start moving into that red bucket.
Okay, that's good. But Anjali, is it just a matter of getting on with the work, getting on with the job, or do you have hurdles there that you are unsure how to get over? Are there real problems that you're trying to overcome within the organization? Or is it just, as you say, we'll get there, and next time we talk, you may well be there?
I think it's a couple of things. I think we're getting very, very close. I think our leadership, for the most part, understands the importance of patients. I think it's actually the middle management. There is a very big range in people's understanding of how to incorporate patient insight into the work. And with the regulations, we're a very regulated industry. I think it's hard for people in certain countries to really know what they can and can't do. And I think that's one of the biggest hurdles that we're trying to overcome at Sanofi.
Okay.
I just make a point on that.
Yeah, go on, Emma. I was going to come to you next anyway.
I just find it fascinating. I find it absolutely fascinating how, we literally put ourselves in a purgatory. One thing that we know is that patients are really proficient users of the social web to get information, to self-diagnose, to share information on treatment. They talk about industry, they talk about research, they talk about our products, and the metrics, are there. It's just that we don't want to use the metrics that patients want to use. So they're right there in front of us. Now, even as recently as last week, what was great about ASCO was the number of patients that actually went to a clinical conference. So this is a great step forward in terms of as an entire industry in a medical community, because we are medical scientists as well as pharmaceutical scientists, you know, ASCO is a real poster boy for patient centricity. So patients are there. And, you know, someone tweeted from the middle of an actual patient went to, it doesn't really matter which company it was, but went to a company and said, I take this product, I have a question. And literally the people on the exhibition stand were stultified. They literally said, we cannot talk to you. So I think, you know, we're a highly regulated industry, so is the financial sector, etc. But we are putting ourselves in a purgatory. We've got channels, we've got metrics. We need to be where the patients want to be, and they're coming to us with questions, and they've got preferred channels. So we need to literally take ourselves out of this purgatory. We need to reset the rules for what patient engagement is.
Emma, would you go as far as one of the people who've commented into us, which is Jas Hummel? Jas says, we should ask patients what they want us to measure in order to be fully patient-centric in our trials and with our measurement. Would you go that far?
Well, patients tell us anyway. You know, look at the rise in the merits of sites like patients like me. Look at the size of, you know, Inspire, you know, people wanting to participate in clinical trials. What I think is a really interesting way of coming at it is from that angle. So not what's wrong with you, but what do you need? You know, it's just simply changing that question and how can we help? If we look at the Ice Bucket Challenge, raised $200 million in a couple of weeks for the ALS Society. The ALS Society were then saying, you know, good grief, you know, we've never run a clinical trial. What do we do with all this money? So here's where Pharma can help. You know, they can step in and say, we have trial experts. Let us help you investigate. So there's different ways that we can approach this, and I think we need to stand back and look at what patients are doing. The metrics are there. You know, ironically, as your caller says, as your contributor says, the metrics are already there. So I think we are agonizing and crucifying ourselves over what the metrics should be when they're right there in front of us anyway.
Okay, some very salient points, I think, there. I'm just going to read out a couple more of our audience comments and then invite other panelists to talk to them. We've only got about 6 or 7 minutes left, though, so we're going to have to be relatively quick. So Marsha Kaplan, hello, Marsha, says that for those with a patient-leading role in their organization, I think that's probably most of the people on this call, how do you measure the impact of your role on the business on its journey towards patient centricity? What does success look like for you? I'm actually reminded of Anne Beale, who I know works with Angeli a lot, who says that her goal is to be effectively without a job. Because all of the learning has been transferred within the organization inherently. I would also like to go to Diane Bryson, who says that middle management is the biggest hurdle. They need to figure out how to be patient-centered while at the same time meeting their traditionally measured business objectives. Effectively, we need a company-wide reassessment of what business objectives need to be in the first place. And then D. Kunat, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, I apologize, D, but D. Kunachikatul, I'm sure I said that wrong. Can you share how some of the KPIs used to measure and report on performance in patient centricity? So can you actually tell us about some of the measurements that you're doing? Jennifer, I'd like to come to you again, if that's all right.
Yeah, so I'd like to go
by the way, comment on any of those things, yeah.
Yeah, so I'd like to go back to one of the comments where I think it was Diane that talked about middle management, and I couldn't agree more. And it could just be a change in the way that we look at things. Sales performance means that if we believe in the products that we come to market with, sales performance means that more patients who are at risk and are at need get the medicines that could help them lead better quality or better overall lives with better outcomes. And so having more patients on the appropriate products, actually sales numbers are patient-centric because they're on the right medicines. And so the couple of things that I could see from a pharma organization that we need to do is it's flipping the messaging. It's making sure that how we share information with managers so that they could share it with the representatives in front of the doctors are how do we help patients understand why they need a branded medicine and why the branded medicine that they are being treated with, why they're being prescribed, is the right medicine for them. So as we move more towards personalized medicine, as our clinical trials support more of this patient-centered, personalized medicine approach, we need to also change our messaging and change our thought process on some of even the more traditional sales numbers, which for us might have been less patient-centric the way that we approach them, But if you approach it from the fact that if patients are diagnosed appropriately and treated with our medicines, that actually is another patient-centric KPI. So I'd love the rest of the panelists to join in. But Diane, I couldn't agree more. Middle management and the way that we message, those are things that really can start to flip that shift over to patient-centricity.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that, right? I mean, if we shift, we've shifted our focus on KPIs to exactly that, which is conversion, right? What's the right solution for the right patient, and how often are we actually having that outcome? And I think that's exactly the right way to look at it.
Okay, I'm going to go to the audience one more time before we finish for the day, and then give all of the panel a chance to comment, to respond, and maybe leave us with any final thoughts. Ruud Clarks, who I've had a couple of offline conversations with in the last couple of weeks, says that new regulations should allow pharma industry to have a dialogue direct with all other stakeholders to build a new prototype for the next generation of healthcare. And that made me think of a poll question which I'd really like to ask, which is one called, what is your biggest barrier to becoming truly patient-centric as an organization? So is it the legal, regulatory, and risk-averse outlook that you might have within your organization? Is it internal attitudes and culture? Is it somehow to do with your products and your pipeline, or is it a lack of training and understanding of what's required? I'm pretty sure that many of you would like to answer several of these answers. I'm going to force you to choose your biggest barrier, and I'll hold that open for a few more seconds, as I can see only a few of you have voted so far, so let's hold that open. 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much, everyone, for voting. Let's have a look at the results. Okay, interesting. I was actually running a patient-centric clinical trials conference yesterday, and I asked the audience whether anyone in that audience felt that regulatory issues were the biggest barrier, and only one person out of probably 130, 140 people in the room put their hand up. The answer is very different on this broader audience today. 43% of you say that that is the biggest thing. Internal attitudes and culture, though, a good third of you nearly. There's very little product-based excuses from the looks of things, and a quarter of you saying lack of training. So if you add those, the second and the fourth answer up, those are all really internal things, aren't they? Those are things that we can certainly do ourselves. So there is clearly a lot to be done here. Hopefully already in the conversation you've got a few tidbits as to how to actually push this forward. Let me let every one of the panelists have one final comment to make there on these results, and also if there's any final message that you would like to have for the audience here on how to move forward when it comes to this proof, measurement, and communication that we are focusing on this webinar. So Anjali, let's start with you.
Thanks, Paul. So, in response to this poll question, I would say that I agree with number 1 and 2 at Sanofi. I would add to number 2 change as well, because Sanofi has undergone a significant amount of change in the past decade, in fact, even as recently as the past couple of weeks. Shall I give my final thoughts, or shall I go to the other panelists to respond to this and then go back to final thoughts?
No, give a final thought. Give a final thought as well.
Okay.
That's okay.
So my view is welcome to the era of patient power as it comes from patent power. We look forward to bringing better health outcomes and a robust future.
Wow. Well, succinctly put there, Anjali. Thank you for that. So, Emma, beat that.
Well, I'm known for being a polemicist and for being garrulous, so I'm already accepting defeat. I won't be able to beat that. What I'm going to say is I want to make 2 points to conclude, and they're going to seem quite trite. Patients don't walk around. They don't walk around going, "Hey, I'm empowered," or "Hey, I'm going to work with this company because they're patient-centric." We need to be visible and present and engaged where patients are. You don't leave the house in the morning and go, "Great, I've got my keys and my extra special smartphone." You just take these things along with you. It's part of the the development and the evolution of what it means to even be a patient. And on that front, the patients are not walking around judging pharma on being patient-centric. They're just saying, well, are you there when I need you? It's as simple as that. And what I'd like to say to conclude in terms of what industry can do, answering those barriers and what we should be doing next is, I'm going to conclude with a really cheesy motivational quote, because people who know me know that I am an avid collector of motivational quotes. And I'm reminded of Henry Ford. If he'd have asked people what they wanted, they'd have said, oh, a faster horse. But what he also said was, it's about the attitude. So whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right,
Very
but
nice.
I think there's a lot of truth there, Emma, so I wouldn't take that away from you. Thank you for that, Emma. Okay, David.
Yeah, sure. I think Jennifer wanted to go next, Paul, but...
Oh, right, okay. Well, I'm not going to hold either of you back, so Jennifer, go for it.
Yeah, so I can just dovetail on that, because there's two quick things. One, as opposed to organizations saying, how do we become more patient-centric, I would hope that through this call what we've really been able to land on is we need to ask patients what they need. We need to look at the data that they're providing and be able to respond to that versus doing things to patients. We need to do things with patients by understanding what they need. So that would be one point. And the second thing that I think, Emma, you brought up earlier, when it comes to big data, and something I feel pharma organizations can really help doctors with, is there's so much data out there, whether it's through a Fitbit, a pedometer or a MyFitnessPal or other things that people are looking into, and doctors don't know how to use that data to more effectively treat patients. And so as organizations, if we can help them really analyze the data that's available to help make better patient decisions, that's a real place that our organizations can work together to truly be patient-centric.
Thank you. You guys sound incredibly well rehearsed. I think you're impressing me here. David, last but not least.
Yeah. Well, I would just build on that, right? And it goes back to this idea that we have to collaborate with all of our stakeholders to bring about the best outcomes for patients. Whether it's healthcare professionals or payers, right? And so when you look at this poll, we have a job to do in each one. We need to influence the environment for legal and regulatory, and then we need to have leadership prioritize this as something that we need to do as a company, and then we need to make sure that everyone's trained. I think we have to do this, and I think my colleagues would agree because, I know firsthand that what we do really does make a difference in people's lives, real people's lives. And so we have a big responsibility.
Well, some wonderful thoughts there from all of our panelists. I really appreciate your contributions here today. I think that it's been an enjoyable conversation. We definitely managed to get some real insights there, particularly towards the end, so really appreciate that of everybody. Now, I'd really like everyone to get out their diaries or mobile phones and to write October 17 or 18 in your schedule, because that's when we're going to be taking this conversation from a webinar into real life. And as you can see in front of you, you can hopefully see that we are running a conference in London. We are also running a conference in the US as well, and if you're interested in that, then just write in and we will tell you a lot more about that. But Emma and Anjali, I believe, are both going to be at that conference, and you'll be able to meet with them and talk to them directly, and obviously a lot more people too. So it's been a worthwhile hour. We've gone over our time now. Take a look at the link that we've just also sent to you if you want to know more information about that event. And then the final thing I'm going to ask you all to do is please write a little bit of feedback to us in the Q&A box. The only way we know how to do these things is based on what you guys tell us. So please tell us what you think. Tell us if you've enjoyed it, if you've hated it, if you want to take up a conversation with any of the panelists here. And I would be very glad to pass that on. I think the panelists have also offered that they can answer any questions that are outstanding. So definitely don't shy away, even if you haven't had your question answered yet so far. Thank you, everybody. Hope to see you soon. Hope to see you on the next on the webinar. And once again, huge thanks to our panelists for giving up their time today and sharing such interesting ideas. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy your day.